Welcome to Cards Hub 365 on Sports Hub STL. Stefan, Caray here with Brenden, Schaeffer. It's a fun one today ahead of a three-game set against divisional foe, the Pittsburgh Pirates. A tough weekend in Boston, Massachusetts. A three-game sweep for the Red Sox. They concluded with an 18-7 victory on Sunday Night Baseball last night. We had the coverage for you after that game. But today is a new day, and we're really excited. This, of course, is brought to you by Gray Bar. All content here at Sports Hub STL is brought to you by DraftKings. Brenden, let's start right away with a new day, a new series, an exciting pitching matchup, Matthew Liberatore versus Carmen Mlodzinski.
You know what? This is exciting. I'm looking forward to see Matthew Liberatore for the second time after he got himself a quality start in a game that didn't necessarily look like it. If you were watching in the third inning, as some of those right-handed batters were starting to get to him, I thought it was important that we got to see Matthew Liberatore battle out of that, because the knock on him has been, okay, we know you can pitch well in short bursts, but can you sustain it? And there was a spell in that first outing, Stefan, where he wasn't sustaining it, and that was something that you kind of felt, oh, here we go again. But for him to then come back out innings 4, 5, and 6 at Busch Stadium and shut things down to be able to log a quality start in that game maybe shows a little bit of the growth and maturation process for Matthew Liberatore. So now you go on the road to Pittsburgh. The question is, can you continue that? Can you start to stack quality starts, and whether he gets 6 and 3, whatever, can you stack good outings one on top of the other as kind of the stopper, hopefully, for this moment in the Cardinal rotation after a tough weekend in Boston?
Certainly hope for more longevity out of Matthew Liberatore today. The Cardinals starting pitchers struggled to get deep into games in Boston. Liberatore quality start his first time out, but he has the opportunity to really bridge the gap between the back end of the rotation and the front end of the rotation. Not sure how it's going to shape out once they get to that 6-man role, but we were discussing this before the show. Liberatore has struggled a bit at PNC Park. Are you a little bit concerned about how he is going to be hit or approached by the Pirates, who are a very right-handed heavy order?
Yeah, they do have the ability, and Stefan, I'm sure this is probably dropping maybe as we're speaking, but the lineup, I'll be curious to see what that actually looks like for Pittsburgh, because they do, with their roster, really outside of O'Neal Cruz, have the ability to stack a bunch of righties against Matthew Liberatore. And I was checking it out before the game. Not only his history at PNC Park, but more so that history against right-handed batters. Last season, an 823 OPS against Matthew Liberatore coming from righties, whereas he shut down lefties, 584. And you might say, well, that sort of plays into this notion that he's better as a reliever. But if you think about it, it's like, well, that kind of makes sense. If he's going out there as a reliever, Oliver Marmol might have a better opportunity to pick the spots that he goes into where he's not forced to face whatever handedness is out there, which when you're the starting pitcher, the opposing manager knows it's your day. They can throw righties at you. And that's sort of what he saw in his first outing of the season. Opposing righties went 6 for 20 against him. Opposing lefties just 0 for 2. So you pretty much saw it in the first outing, and Liberatore was still able to have a quality start. So I will be looking for whatever lineup they throw at him to continue to make those adjustments. And, of course, we're always talking about the velo, Stefan. I think that's another aspect of it. Whatever ballpark he's in, whoever he's facing, can he do as he started out last week at Busch Stadium, 96, 95, but then started to tailor off a little bit toward that 92, 93 range before finding some additional velocity in that final inning of work? Can he sustain that for a full outing? He was aware post-game last week about the fact that his velocity dipped in the middle of his start, but I think took some pride, rightfully so, in the fact that he brought it back. So what does that look like for Liberatore today? I feel a little bit bad sometimes, Stefan, when with certain guys it feels like we hyper-fixate on their velo. I do feel like, though, with Liberatore, it's a somewhat reasonable way to approach it, because his velo in the past has been indicative of his ability to stay the course during a 5-6 inning outing as he sees a lineup the second and third time through.
Well, certainly you want to see that depth. You want to see him be able to get deeper and deeper into the game. Carmen Mlodzinski has struggled to start his season, but has been very successful against the Cardinals in his career. 1-0 with a 1.13 ERA, just 1 earned run in 8 innings pitched. This will be his first career start against St. Louis, so maybe they can continue to knock the ball around as their offense has all season long. We said it yesterday, the offense hasn't been the issue, but the pitching needs to deliver a little bit more than they have to start the early 2025 campaign.
Yeah, it definitely does. And you mentioned the opposing pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates today. Cardinal batters specifically, I believe with what I pulled up on ESPN, are 4 for 22 against him, which is not particularly strong. And one of those hits belongs to Ivan Herrera, who's going on the IL today. So relatively limited sample, but you're right. This is a guy that, despite maybe a rocky start to his season after giving up 4 earned runs against the Tampa Bay Rays without finishing the 4th inning. There is a little bit of a track record of success against the Cardinals. So how does this lineup that has really been off to a hot start, and I think that would have been the storyline surrounding this team if not for some of the recent pitching struggles, how does that lineup find its mettle against a pitcher that, you ostensibly think they should be able to handle in a ballpark where, there should be some opportunities to knock the ball around a little bit tonight?
They played 500 at PNC Park last year, 3-3, went 8-5 against the Pirates. But I think it's an interesting narrative looking at Majinski and looking at Liberatore, two guys that have really bounced between starting and relieving. Coming into this game, back end of the rotation, plenty to prove. The storylines sort of write themselves, but I'm very curious to see how the Cardinals respond after a really frustrating evening. They peaked a little bit offensively in the later stages of that game. Maybe that carries over. Talked to my dad this morning. It's supposed to be in the 20s.
Oh my goodness!
It's going to be a very, very cold evening at PNC Park.
Okay, so it's safe to say that Nolan Arenado will have the balaclava on, because I think if it's in the 50s, Arenado, the SoCal guy's like, all right, we're going to go ahead and we're going to stay warm here. That sounds brutal, though. The idea that you're talking about truly December, January type of weather here in early April. Yep, you want to keep moving. You want to keep the limbs limber for sure in that kind of weather. By the way, if you're watching us on Twitter, I guess they call it X. I'm kind of a holdover from a previous regime. Or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you do end up subscribing to the Sports Hub STL YouTube. Shows with Stefan and I and many other contributors to our content are always available on YouTube. But I said, you know what, for a little Monday matinee, we'll make sure to throw it out there on Twitter this afternoon too, so people get a little bit of an idea for what we're doing there. But it looks as though you can comment. I think I've set it up on YouTube. As long as you're subscribed, and on Twitter, we're getting some of those comments rolling in. So definitely feel free to jump into the live chat if you have some questions. I want to jump to this right away, Steph, and we'll get into some of the Ivan Herrera stuff as well. This question comes from Austin on Twitter. He wants to know if we think the Cardinals will be over or at 500 by the end of April. I know you've taken a look at a little bit of that upcoming schedule for the Cardinals. Pirates are coming into this one 3-7, so maybe an opportunity to get to them, although you do have to face Paul Skeens in this series. But kind of how do you view the rest of April playing out? And certainly we know pitching is going to be the key for this team. The offense, though, continuing the way that it's played, could potentially get this club back above 500. They're just sitting a little bit below it now.
I think you have to think about it based on the attributes that this team has. Right now, the offense is soaring and the pitching is lacking a little bit. So when you have that 50-50 split, the offense is carrying the weight and the pitching isn't. I think you're going to run into success in about half your games, and then you're going to run into a lack of success in about half your games. They're sitting one game under 500. I think 500 is certainly attainable at the end of this month. They're facing teams that are a combined 20-17. That's Pittsburgh, that's Philadelphia, that's Houston, that's New York. But these are really interesting tests because at the beginning of the season, it was very American League heavy. Now it's National League heavy, and not just National League heavy, but National League contender heavy. So we'll really see what the Cardinals are made of over the next few weeks. But if they continue to hit the ball well, I think that's going to even out later on in this season.
Here's what I will say, though. You want to get this series in Pittsburgh, I think, because you come in with a record for the Pirates of 3-7, and I'm not saying that that's definitely indicative of who they are as a team, but when you look at the next couple of series as the Cardinals return back home, the Phillies, we know that that's a lineup that mirrors a little bit more like what the Red Sox are capable of, and you saw what that Boston team just did to Cardinal pitching. And the Astros, maybe a little bit of a team in flux, but they're always going to be expected to be in that contender range. And then the Mets thereafter, and a Braves team that has gotten off to a slow start. Like, this is a little bit of a sneaky, tough April for the Cardinals. I would just like to think that they might be able to get off on the right foot in game one against Pittsburgh. Get that first one, and then if you can take it, to Paul Skeens, it's not like you're throwing chopped liver on the other side with Sonny Gray. There's an opportunity to win this series. I just think it might be kind of important for the Cardinals to do it. It kind of feels silly on April the 7th to say, oh, it's a must-win series, or they need to do this, that, or the other. But when you look at the upcoming schedule, it certainly couldn't hurt for the Cardinals to be able to get this road trip wrapped up in a very productive way before they face some of those tougher opponents that'll be waiting for them back in St. Louis.
I think it's safe to say that this fan base is not used to teams of the Cardinals hovering around 500. They've had to kind of deal with it over the last few seasons. So you'd like to see them stay above 500, continue to put out good performances, both offensively and pitching-wise. But it's tough to do. They've allowed 20 runs in the 7th inning or later through the first 5 games of April. They've allowed 10 first-inning runs in that same stretch. So they've been trailing and they've taken leads, but then they've gotten the leads taken away from them in the latter stretches of this game. You can't ask your offense to provide 15 runs a game. It's just not going to happen. But what they have been consistently doing is having 10 or more hits. They set the National League record yesterday with 9 consecutive games with 10 or more hits. So that's something that the Cardinals can hang their hat on a little bit. We just have to look at the silver linings here. And I think we neglected to maybe mention it last night, that they were dealing with opening weekend at Fenway Park. I mean, the pageantry of that, the magnitude of that, the scale of that, with a fan base that is as energized and as excited as the Redbird faithful in between the arches, that's a tough place to play. So maybe they can get to PNC Park with a team that is in a state of flux in the Pirates and go and take advantage of an opportunity to get back above 500 and win the series.
I think that's certainly what they'll be looking to do. And then we kind of wonder, we've talked about the starting pitching, and you've got Sonny Gray going a little bit later in the series, which should hopefully give them a decent opportunity against Paul Skeens. But you've also got a situation right now with the bullpen where I think that's going to be a question coming into this series as well, as to how, like, if you're Oliver Marmol, how do you manage your way through these games based on who's available and who's, you can look at it from like a competitiveness perspective of, okay, who's struggling right now? What roles do we need to maybe fit some guys into to be able to get the most out of them and get them back on track? But when there's a number of guys kind of going through it at the same time, you're also dealing with a little bit of that attrition in terms of guys who may not be available based on the number of guys that you had to use on Sunday in that doubleheader. Thankfully, you did have Graceffo as the 27th man to eat a few of those innings for you. But still, I think the bullpen conversation, Stefan, is one that will be interesting to monitor in this series, because with guys like, I know Roycroft threw some at the end yesterday, with guys like him and Ryan Fernandez maybe kind of still finding their footing on this season. Those are two right-handers that I think are going to end up being pretty important this week if you are the Cardinals and looking to kind of bridge that gap. Ideally, you come into the late innings with some leads, but those are going to be the guys that I think you're going to need to see turning things around a little bit. And, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not those guys are able to handle the load.
I'm curious on your opinion on this, Brenden. You look at the rotation and the fact that they're going to go to a 6-man rotation in about a week's time. You look at this group and Steven Matz and how valuable he has been coming out of the bullpen to eat innings, especially when starters have not been able to get deep into games. Do you think that's going to change the way that we perceive the bullpen, the way that Ollie Marmol manages his bullpen, and maybe the roles are going to shift a little bit? In my mind, I feel like everybody needs to be available to eat 2 or 3 innings at certain points if the starting pitching can't get deeper into games than they have been to start this year.
Yeah, it's funny when we come into a season and we can talk about on paper what guys fit where. Okay, this guy's an 8th inning guy. This guy's more of a 7th inning. Here's a middle reliever that'll bridge the gap. And like everything's nice and tidy and in their neat little box. And then you play the games and you're like, well, what happens if the starter only goes 3? Like you don't really script for that. And yes, you do have guys like Steven Matz right now that are still in that bullpen role to be able to, in theory, give you some coverage there. But to your point, this is a Cardinals team that said, hey, by April 16th, we're going to go to that 6-man rotation. I have to be completely honest. I'm still a skeptic. I'm a skeptic that that's actually going to come to fruition. Not that they're intentionally trying to say one thing and do another. I think the 6-man rotation is sort of like, hey, that's a way that it could work if we get there and everybody's intact and everything's going okay. But I think you also have to pay some mind to, let's recognize the strain on the bullpen. If you're asking, hey, some of these guys who are maybe more used to being 1-inning relievers have to go and start giving you multiple just because of the state of things, what happens when you remove your long man from that? Like if Steven Matz is not part of that equation, now he's in the rotation, you've got one fewer reliever, and it was one of the guys that has the ability to cover 3-4 innings in a given spell, that he's now part of that rotation mix. And if he's getting into the rotation, well, is Steven Matz going 7? I mean, who's going 7 in this rotation consistently to make sure that you're not putting that undue burden on the bullpen? I think that's where I understand the impetus. Like, you had to get Liberatore in the rotation, and I applaud the Cardinals for doing that. Everybody else was kind of an easy fit. You understood where they were going to slot in, and Matz is in that situation where he's on an expiring contract, so it's maybe not fair, but you can be a little more malleable with him and say, hey, man, appreciate everything you do for the team. We're going to need a little bit of this runway for Libby, and then we'll get you in there. And he just kind of is in a spot where he says, all right, I mean, that's the team player attitude. I'll take it. But it's kind of giving him that carrot of, you will be back in the rotation. We respect the good spring you had. But like when you get down to it, is it going to be sustainable if everybody stays healthy and is still locked into their spots to just say, all right, Steven, we're ready for you on April the 16th. Everybody else bumps back a day and we'll roll this thing 6 through. Yeah, you can do that. But if everybody in that group is going 5 innings or so, and occasionally you have one that goes 3, what does that do to the rest of the bullpen? Stefan, my first answer is it says the Memphis shuttle better get warmed up, because we're probably going to see some activity when it comes to that here pretty soon.
I can imagine so. This is a very, very interesting time for the Cardinals. As they say, the lineup that you see before All-Star break and before the trade deadline is usually not the same as the one that you see after the trade deadline, both offensively and pitching-wise. So I'm sure there will be changes that happen throughout the course of the year. We hope that it is nothing to do with injury, but more so just different roster moves and the Cardinals making decisions for their future. But let's get back on track to today. Liberatore, in his career against the Pirates, 15 earned runs. 14 of them have come at PNC Park. Does that concern you a little bit for today?
I'm not going to probably play too much into ballpark factors, because it's hard. It feels like anytime you're talking, and I get it, they're an NL Central opponent, so he's faced him a number of times for this to maybe be more of a sticky stat, something that you do pay attention to going in. I just feel like, Stefan, the key for him is the mentality, just having that bulldog mentality of knowing, like, I don't have to hold anything back, but I also need to have that energy on the mound that allows me to sustain it a few times through the batting order rather than just these shorter stints. I think his success is going to be predicated upon his mindset and his ability to, he's talked a lot about his journaling and the different things he has done to put himself in the headspace to go out and be that attack-oriented guy 6 innings at a time. I feel like that's key more than anything to do with the ballpark or, again, even the lineup. Because if you're sitting here going, well, they're throwing 8 righties at me today, which could potentially happen, and then you allow that to become part of your thought process as Matthew Liberatore, you're leaving something on the table, right? You're kind of leaving out what you need to be focused on and getting a little bit too caught up in what the other side is doing or what the ballpark factor has been for you in the past. I think if he keeps that mentality that we saw all through spring, and frankly, I think he did. He had it in the first outing at Busch. It just was a little bit of a blip in the third. And the fact that he was able to come back from that tells me that he's in the place he needs to be right now. You throw the past out the window and make sure you've got a mentality that's better than any time you've pitched at PNC Park before. And I really do believe that Matthew Liberatore has that within him. This is kind of that put up or shut up season for Libby if he's going to be a long-term MLB starter. So I feel like there's no better opportunity than today to kind of continue on that path.
Well, we were discussing earlier that the Cardinals have played the Pirates plenty of times, 8-5 last year. 9 of the 13 games they played against the Pirates were decided by 2 or less runs. So you always know you're going to get a battle when you play the Pittsburgh Pirates if you are the St. Louis Cardinals. A couple of roster moves were announced earlier this morning. Of course, we got the news about Ivan Herrera, that it is left knee inflammation, so nothing more than that, which Ollie Marmol seemed to be very relieved about. The corresponding move was Yohel Pozo was recalled from Memphis. Pozo made his Major League debut with the Rangers back in 2021, 74 at-bats, hit right over 280 with a home run and 9 RBIs. Do you like this move? I know a lot of fans would have probably liked to see Jimmy Crooks, but that feels like a player that needs to be playing every day at this point in time.
Yeah, I think his time is going to come. He's a very exciting player offensively, and really they say he does a nice job behind the plate as well. I think the role for Pozo here is going to be, as you said, he's going to be the backup to Pedro Pagés, who the Cardinals have been looking for. Think about it this way. Ivan Herrera has been statistically one of the best hitters in Major League Baseball this year, and yet you are seeing Pedro Pagés consistently garner starts. Says a lot about what they view Pedro Pagés to be behind the plate. The way he manages the staff, the way he can manage the run game. We saw him with a nice back pick at first base yesterday. Like, those are things that Pedro Pagés brings to the table. They were looking to get him opportunities anyway. So now I think there's going to be a runway for him. I don't think any catcher in the modern game is going to play 150 games a year. You're always going to take some days off. And I mean, I haven't seen the lineup today, but it could be one right away today, given that he caught 2 games essentially for the Cardinals yesterday. We'll see if Pozo gets in there right away. I'll be interested to see. But I think Pedro Pagés is going to be ready to carry the load. That's kind of the way they view him. And being a defense-first catcher, I think there is a lot of pride that he takes in being able to go out there and do it on a day-to-day basis. And look, I think he's been no slouch at the plate either. So, yeah, I think Pozo is kind of the name that you bring up to back up the guy if you feel you have a regular daily starter on your hands. the Cardinals certainly do in Pages. The only reason he hadn't been that for the duration of the season is that, again, Ivan Herrera's bat plays, and they already moved away one MVP caliber catcher from the catcher position to first base to get his bat in the lineup. And so they've been trying to figure those things out, Stefan. But if you add Jimmy Crooks, it's sort of another situation that goes, okay, how do we get this guy in the lineup to make sure his development isn't hampered? Get a look at Pozo, veteran that's been around the block a little bit. And so hopefully that prior big league experience allows him to be able to settle in to whatever role the Cardinals ask of him here.
I am interested to see what Ollie Marmol does with Pages, not because I don't think that Pedro can play every game this series, but remember, yesterday he had to come in halfway through the game for Ivan Herrera and catch game 2 of the doubleheader. And if he catches today, I don't think it would be too far of a thought to think that maybe Pozo gets a start in this series just to give Pages a little bit of a break.
Yeah, I think that could definitely happen, whether it's today, tomorrow. You know, you have the Sonny Gray game tomorrow, and so it may be that you want the pre-existing relationship that Pages and Gray have to make sure you get your best chance at trying to top Paul Skeens, who's going to be a tough customer on the other side. So again, I keep refreshing Stefan to see if the Cardinals have a lineup out, and if anybody happens to see one before we do, you can throw it in the comments and let us know. Wouldn't be shocked to see it today if they think Pozo is ready for that opportunity. But that's what's tough, man. By the same token, you're going to look at that and say, we're trying to give Matthew Liberatore every opportunity to succeed. And so, you know, having a catcher with whom he's unfamiliar could be a little bit difficult. It's actually one of the more fascinating aspects of this series, Stefan, is like, what are those conversations right now between Pedro Pages and Oliver Marmol of, all right, we know who we've got pitching for us. We know that you have been asked to do a lot the last couple of days. How are you feeling, bud? What's it look like? And are you ready to catch 18 innings the next 2 days? Because it wouldn't shock me if Pedro Pages said, yeah, Skip, I got it. But it also wouldn't shock me if they say, hey, we got to be fair to Pedro and kind of give him a little bit of a breather after all the work that he put in yesterday. That's going to be really fascinating to see.
Not to mention erring on the side of precaution. You already have one catcher down with injury. You might not want to overdo it with Pages, even if he's willing to go and play. And as Cardinals fans well know, defense will win championships, with Yadier Molina being one of the best defensive catchers in the history of the game. Pages certainly is a great defender. But that's a very interesting segue to another point that is going to be a factor in this series, the defense of the Pirates. O'Neal Cruz has had his struggles in center field. This is a team that's been outscored by 22 runs. That's tied for the most in all of Major League Baseball. Do you think that's an offensive thing, a pitching thing, or a defensive thing, or maybe a combination of all three for Pittsburgh?
I think it's an aspect the Cardinals can possibly take advantage of. It's probably a combination of factors, as you mentioned. But if you're looking at a Cardinal team that's setting franchise records with how many times they're getting 10 hits in a game, that means at least they're putting the ball in play. And I think if you're putting the ball in play into this outfield, and you've got a center fielder that's sort of got the yips, whatever's going on defensively, trying to acclimate to that position as he played it last year, but it's his full-time role now. It's going to be interesting to see if the Cardinals can just say, hey, put the bat on the ball and see what the Pirates end up doing with it. You know, they've got some good fielders on this team. I know Brian Hayes is stalwart at third base defensively. But yeah, you're going to try to put the ball in play as often as you possibly can. That might come easier said than done tomorrow against Skeens. But generally, I think that's going to be the strategy. And if you've got a team that's kind of going through those doldrums, whether it's because their pitchers aren't doing their jobs or the defense behind those guys aren't up to par at this point, there's something that the Cardinals can kind of continue to apply the pressure, and you're just hoping to see those good at-bats. And we really have. I mean, again, it feels like we're going to have to lean more on some of the negative aspects of the team right now because they are 4-5 after starting 3-0. Like, it stinks. We don't have to lie about that. But I do think if you look at the way the at-bats are still coming together, the 7, 8, 9 pitch at-bats that oftentimes ends in a walk or ends in a home run, like Jordan Walker hit his first homestand for the Cardinals. Like, those sorts of things are happening for a lineup that, again, I think we all saw there could be more in there. Keeping that hot streak going, though, is going to be significant, and the Pirates may help you out in some regards with that when it comes to the defense in this ballpark.
I can imagine that for Brant Brown, any strategy where they can stay through the middle of the field regardless of who's in center field is one that he's going to be a fan of. That's pretty much basic offensive strategy, and it makes the job a little bit easier on the Cardinals. Time-up pitches, drive it to the middle, maybe to the opposite field, and you're going to have some success. It is a bigger ballpark at PNC Park. Left center has been known to allow the ball to fly a little bit more if you can dead pull it to right. But as I mentioned, the weather conditions very cold tonight, so it's going to be difficult to hit for the home run ball. And the Cardinals have been getting it done in a number of ways, so that shouldn't be too big of a concern. But a 5:40 Central Time start It's going to be a very, very fun series, a very fun end to the road trip. And the Cardinals, I can imagine, will have a little bit of extra motivation to end this road trip on the right foot.
I think that's 100% right. So I'm looking forward to the baseball tonight. I'm also looking forward to some college basketball tonight, and this is going to be kind of your last chance. And Sports Hub STL's content, of course, brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Turn your college
gambling problem, call 1.
Today, new players get $50 in Pick Six credits instantly with just a $5 entry, and DraftKings Pick Six is now available in Missouri for you to download right there on your phone. So do so. Download the DraftKings Pick Six app now and use code STL Sports. That's STL Sports for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick Six credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick Six from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick Six credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos. Gambling problem? Call.
All right, so a lot of right-handed pitching for Pittsburgh in this series, and I know we're not in the business of making predictions. That's something that we can't control.
I can predict anything. What do you speak for yourself? I know it all. No, I'm just playing.
Okay, perfect. We need to get a crystal ball and maybe just take a track of how our predictions pan out. Is there a player that you're looking at, how they've played to start this season or maybe over the last week, that you think can have a big impact offensively in this series against Pittsburgh?
You know what? I'm gonna put my chips in on Brendan Donovan to have a series here, because we have seen the bat be fine for him to start, but just I think he's a little bit out of sorts in some regards. There was a base running play yesterday where he was maybe trying to take that extra base prior to the Helsley meltdown that I feel like if you had maybe just held serve at first, keep the line moving, you might have had some insurance runs to help you through that situation where Helsley could have had some more room to breathe. There was the play on the homestand where he threw home, and obviously that's one where he probably would have liked to have had it back. I think Brendan Donovan is one of the best players on this team, a true like leader and heart and soul kind of guy for this Cardinal club. He's been doing fine offensively. I think it's just a little out of sorts in a couple of plays that have happened. That's not characteristic of him. And I've seen Cardinals fans kind of get down on Downey a little bit, and I don't like to see that because I really do think he is important to this team. And he is one of the guys that has a little bit of success against the starter today. He's 1 for 2 with an RBI. Like you said, there's not very many guys that have had success against him in the limited sample. But you mentioned right-handed pitching. Donnie is a left-handed batter who we know is liable to be relatively high up in that batting order. I think you're going to see a pretty good series from Brendan Donovan because we all know the type of player that he is. A couple of moments here and there that aren't typical of him does not necessarily negate or change that. So I'm looking for Brendan Donovan to have a pretty good series, I think. I think it kind of matches up with the type of pitching that you're going to see from Pittsburgh and just the type of player and gamer that he really is.
I like Lars Nootbaar this week, particularly because he took a little bit of a skid during the Boston series compared to the torrid start that he had to the year. But again, every time he's up at the plate, he's working great counts. He's putting himself in a position to get on base. He's been the ideal leadoff hitter for the Cardinals, and I think that continues. Again, another left-handed hitter with really good awareness of the strike zone. And against a guy like Paul Skeens, Majinski, Mitch Keller, you have to have that. You have to be able to have a table setter for the middle of your order.
And I want to see Lars Nootbaar putting the ball in play this week because you mentioned we're not in the business of making predictions, except for my bold prediction for the season for the St. Louis Cardinals was Lars Nootbaar-centric. And I said, look, you're finally going to get that all-star campaign you've been waiting for from Newt if you're a Cardinals fan. But I figured that wasn't bold enough necessarily. I don't know if I've spoken to you about this, Stefan, so you can see you can react to this one. I said that Lars Nootbaar will have more walks this year than strikeouts, which I think I went through last year's MLB pages and saw that only Juan Soto and I think Steven Kwan also did it. That's a very rarefied air for guys that have really good contact skills, don't strike out much, and also great plate discipline. Right now, Lars Nootbaar has 6 walks to 5 strikeouts. I will be monitoring it all season if he stays close, because right now, we could stop the count. He would be in that position for more walks than strikeouts. But what do you think of that as far as bold predictions go? since it's not something that very many guys in MLB do. However, you look at the profile of Lars Nootbaar, if he's going to take a step forward this year, I was thinking something along those lines could be kind of interesting.
I totally agree. I think that it is indicative and imperative for Lars Nootbaar to stay healthy. And the healthier he stays, I think the more consistent he will be at the plate. That has been a luxury that the Cardinals haven't been able to afford over the last few seasons. And Lars covers the plate better than just about anyone in the league. That's why he walks as much as he does. You look at the metrics, they're at the top of the league in so many offensive categories. And the larger sample size you get, the more opportunities you get to see Lars Nootbaar shining. And I think that that's the direction he's going to go this season. That's why I picked him. I didn't get to watch him a whole lot with my dad's first 2 years with the Cardinals because of injury. So I love getting to see him in the lineup every single day. And I think that he has sort of that infectious personality that you were talking about with Brendan Donovan that makes the clubhouse so much fun. He plays the game loose. He plays the game the right way. And I think that this week against the Pirates, he's going to make his name known in more ways than one.
Yeah, and he has been a real force in terms of just kind of setting the tone at the very top of that lineup for the Cardinals. So we'll see what kind of series he has, my guy, Brendan Donovan. I want to make sure, too, Stefan, well, there's any other nuggets that you want to drop before we get out of here, that's more than okay. But I wanted to make sure that we highlight this comment real quick. Someone didn't realize it was Stefan, but it is him. He's part of Sports Hub STL now, and so make sure to give him a follow on Twitter and stay tuned on the Sports Hub STL YouTube channel for him as he contributes to not only the Daytime Cards Sub 365, but Stefan and I, if you want to go back and hear more of us talking about Cards baseball, we did the post game last night after the doubleheader wrapped things up in Boston. So glad to have Stefan on board. And somebody didn't realize it was you, but then they knew, and now they're in the know, if you will.
Well, it's probably because I didn't wear a ton of hair gel. That has been a qualifying characteristic for people of my family. So I think it's great to be here and everybody being so supportive of us in St. Louis and beyond. This has been a great opportunity to get to talk about baseball with some really, really intelligent and kind people. So I'm really, really amped to get going and to see how this season plays out. Hopefully more good post-game shows than not. I'd rather not have to recap games like last night again.
It was tough. It was a little tough, but we found it through. No doubt about it, man. No doubt.
Well, I have nothing more to say. I'm really pumped up to see how the Cardinals respond this week with, of course, the Pirates and the Phillies. 3-game series. Game 1 beginning at 5:40. Carmen Mlodzinski versus Matthew Liberatore. It is going to be a battle as it was last year. So thank you so much for joining us here on the Cards Hub 365. This is going to be a great series and the first National League opponent the Cardinals will play in 2025.